Okay. Welcome to the Confidence by the Stars podcast. I'm your host, Dorrissa Griffin, astrologer, attorney, and app developer. And I'm also your horoscope hype woman. And I'm here to help you make the best out of your astrological journey. And today I have with me two amazing guests. I'm so excited to have the both of them on. I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and I hope that you'll understand why they're so special. So, first, I would like to introduce Tamerri Ater, MBA. She's also called the Astrofashionista. She is a certified professional astrologer, Reiki practitioner, and founder of Gift of the Nile, spiritual wellness products rooted in ancient Egyptian ritual. She is also a senior astrology editor for Astrology.com and Horoscope.com. For over 15 years, Tamerri has advised thousands of people on how to align with their soul's destiny, career path, and improve and attract healthy relationships and partnerships. Tamerri used astrology to guide her career as a beauty product development professional and often collaborates with global brands and media outlets. She has a BA in TV production from Loyola Marymount University and an MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. I also have the amazing pleasure and honor to introduce you to world-renowned expert in Egyptology and African history, Mr. Mathu Ater. He holds a BA from Cal State, Los Angeles, and an MA from Pepperdine University. He's affiliated with NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects, Los Angeles chapter. Mathu was an 11-year architectural apprentice to the late Lester Oliver Bankhead, and he was a student of the late Dr. Yusuf Benin Yakatanen since 1981. He made his first trip to Kemetic, Egypt with Dr. Ben in 1985. Mathu is uniquely qualified to speak on architectural and religious themes as his over 30 years as an architectural and graphic media specialist facilitates a fresh and uncommon approach to the study of Egyptology and history. Welcome, Mr. Ater and Tamerri.
Thank you. Excited to be here finally and get it done. I guess the timing worked out better, right?
Yes, the timing worked out so perfectly. I couldn't have planned it. We wanted to really have something around Black History Month, but we have a second opportunity with this coming Juneteenth to be able to talk about things that are so important in terms of astrology and its connection to Black history. And I remember when I asked Tamerri to come on, she was like, I would love to do this. I'm so excited. Let's go. And then when I hit her with the question, she was like, pause. You need to talk to my dad because he really can give you the tea on all of these questions about Black history. So I was like, yes, let's do that. So the fact that we get to have him on and it's the special moment with Father's Day coming up, I think this is just so incredible. So yes, the timing is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick it off. I would love for you guys to tell me about your journey with astrology, your journey with African history. I mean, I really wanted to make sure that I gave you the opportunity to really let the world know what it is that you are bringing here in terms of your expertise. But I would love for you to talk more about that journey for yourselves individually.
I'll start. You want to start or me start?
Well,
Okay, I'll start because my journey really starts with him. So when I was born, tell this story because it's so important. Baba Doye, who's one of my dad's best friends, and he's, I guess, an honorary godfather. To the Asher Kwesi's my godfather, which we'll get into. But he did my naming ceremony, and my name, Tamerri, is beloved land. It's an ancient name for Egypt or Kemet. So Egypt is a European name, but my name was a name for Egypt or another name. He got it from one of Dr. Ben's books, who you mentioned in his bio. But yeah, so at the naming ceremony, which I found out later, Baba Doye, who conducted the ceremony, read my natal chart. And it's one of those things that I knew that astrology was talked about there, like, because I was born under the sign the bull, Taurus, and I couldn't really wear red growing up, which Baba Day had made like recommendations, like put me in yellows, and so there was things that we adhered to. And I remember when I was in second grade, my friend Milan Wiley, I always shout her out. She asked me my zodiac sign, and I was like 6 years old. I didn't really even know what that was, and I asked my dad, and I remember just that kind of like opening up the world. And so astrology has just always been a part of my life. And then when I was 13, we had a family tragedy and I lost my mom to suicide. And so that obviously really affected all of us, the entire dynamic. And I think it was one of those things, and it's weird because I've never told the story with him right next to me. But it was one of those things where we didn't really talk about it. And for me, being the firstborn and internalizing everything, it really manifested as like anxiety and depression for me, which people didn't really know that. And so I learned more to like achieve and like, be the cheerleading captain and the president of the dance team and just all the things. And just I put all of my energy into like work and achievement. And people know that that is not a true way that you get fulfilled in life. Like those accolades will not fulfill your soul. So when I graduated college, I worked in the office in Beverly Hills, and my boyfriend at the time, like I was like, going through a lot of things and I would share it with him. Like he kind of knew what was going on. But the Astro twins, they're celebrity astrologers, Ophi and Tally, their manager worked in my office and they're like, oh, they're coming in because they lived in New York. And I was like, oh, I love astrology. And so then when they came in, she was like, oh, we'll have them do a reading for you. They looked at me and they were like, you're either a Taurus or a Scorpio. And I'm a Taurus sun, but I have a Scorpio rising. And I like was like, "Okay, how did they do that?" Because it's not even before like, this was before they even got to the reading. So anyway, I at that point, I really became obsessed. Like my first book that I got, I think from the Grove, the Barnes& and Noble, probably when I was with him, cover to cover, I started reading all these books on, like, how to actually read natal charts, and it was a hobby, so I was, like, just got all my friends' birth times, and so this was 2005, quite a while ago, and after a while, my Capricorn boyfriend was like, "Well, you should start getting paid if you're gonna be doing this for people," and I didn't think anybody would pay for astrology, which is crazy now at the time that we were living in, and I was like, "No." So it took me quite a while to actually say, "Well, I'm actually gonna get paid for my services," so that was I was even doing readings for coworkers because I was working in beauty and product development for different brands. And in 2015, I actually launched my business like with the website that my Scorpio boyfriend designed for me. And I, my first clients were really like my coworkers, like people that I knew. And so organically, it just started to kind of grow and by word of mouth. And I started doing collaborations with like beauty brands because I was already in that space. So people would have like launch parties and I would do like readings there. And so it became a part of me where I just started including it in my portfolio because I'm like, well, I'm just going to show up authentically as myself. And when I look at my natal chart and the placements that I have, Taurus Sun, Scorpio rising, I have Mars, Saturn, Pluto in Scorpio rising, all that water depth energy opposing this Taurus, which is really about material goods, and Mercury in Taurus, and I have an Aquarius moon. So it's like incorporating the physical love for beauty and aesthetics with the more spiritual, deeper work. So I was able to kind of learn how to live my chart, but it was like a long process. I mean, this has been almost a 20-year journey for me at this point, but it really started with my dad and his connection to African spirituality and history, and it all kind of organically happened. I didn't plan any of it. It just was written in the stars, I guess.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
you have to begin at the beginning. And Dr. Joseph Alfredo Antonio Benyakinan was the guy that taught me about ancient Kemet, Tamerri Kemet. And
Oh,
so one of the things that struck me about Dr. Ben, when I first heard him say, we came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells at the foothills of the mountains of the moon. I said, wow, that's profound. So I was a student of architecture and I was taking geology. and I began to find out about the Great Rift Valley in Central Africa. The huge rift with two major mountain ranges on either side of it, surrounding a lake we call Victoria today, but they call Mwanza, was the lake that they actually called it. And so these two mountain ranges had the tallest mountains in Africa, 19,000 for Kilimanjaro, over 17,000 for Rwenzori on the opposite side. So there are mountain ranges on both sides of the lake. And so when I found out through Dr. Ben that the ancient Kemetic or Egyptians said we came from the beginning of the Nile, I had to look into that with more detail. I'd done architecture. I worked on hillside houses, designed hillside houses. And so I was really attuned to the idea of topography. So people look at Africa at a map. They don't realize anything about the topography and the terrain of Africa. They just see Africa. It's a big place. But when you look at the topography, that's very important. So that's one of the things that I focus on because of my architectural background. Whenever I look at a map, I want to know about the topographic features in the map. And so what I found out was that when you leave Cairo in Egypt, which is right at the Mediterranean, and you go up the Nile, you have to go up, not down, you go up. And as you go up, you get to one point in the South Sudan where there's a very steep rise all the way up, and it takes you directly to the equator. And Africa is divided in half. There's 4 points, really, north, east, west, and south, divides Africa. So when you get to that point, that is the point. This is very important to you all who study astrology. At the equator, when you leave the Mediterranean, the most dominant feature in the skies is the North Star. And as you go up the Nile, when you get to the equator, as soon as you cross the equator, the North Star disappears from sight. And there's a whole new other topic of stars on the other side of the equator. But from the equator down to the Mediterranean, the ruling is the North Star. And the North Star is the goddess Isis. And so one of the things they called, and this is where astrology starts. Julius Caesar had a son by Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last queen of the Ptolemy dynasty, which is a Greco-Roman dynasty. And so she was the last queen. And she had a son by Julius Caesar. And eventually, Caesar was assassinated. And he wasn't the ruler for very long. And the next king or ruler was a guy called Augustus. Augustus Caesar. He became the ruler. And under Augustus, he had a guy named Marcus Poli. His architect for Augustus was the same architect for Julius Caesar. And he wrote a book called The 10 Books on Architecture. And that book became the first book Europe ever had on architecture. And it was based upon what they had learned in Kemetic, in Egypt. The Ptolemies were the dynasty there, and Cleopatra was the very last Ptolemy king. And so it was under Sosigenes. He was a priest. With Augustus and Cleopatra that introduced astrology as we know it today to the Western world. And the Egyptians or the Kemetic had founded 2 major sites. One place called Edfu and the other place called Dendera. Dendera was devoted to the mother of all mother goddesses, Hathor Hathor. And so
Product named after Hathor.
that's right. It's named after her. She was a mother of mothers. She was a mother of Isis, before Isis. And then her ring, Horus, was devoted to her ring. The temple of Horus at Fu. Those are the first 2 sites that these Africans founded when they came down from the equator, from Central Africa, and they got to the border of what we call Nubia and Egypt today, they began to build the first sites. So Edfu and Denderah were the first two sites that they built. And they went on down the Nile until they got to Memphis, called Mennefer. When they got to Mennefer, that's when they began to establish the civilization of what we call Egypt today. And so there's a man named Imhotep. Everybody listening to this or any other podcast or any should know Imhotep. Imhotep means he who comes in peace. He was the first great recorded Merket. That's what they call the architects, the Merket. Murket. The Merket, Imhotep was the father of architects. Really, he had a father too, but we don't know much about his dad, but we know about Imhotep because she had been to his site. And she took a picture standing in front of his pyramid, and that was the first pyramid built in Kemetic. And what he did is he took a series of tombs called mastaba, flat tombs, and he stacked one on top of the other until he experimented some more and stacked some more on top of it till he got the first pyramid in Kemetic. And it set the precedent for all the pyramids that were later built. Now, we don't have time to go into all of this, so I just wanted to make sure that I touched on that because this is where we had the beginning of astronomy. Because eventually the Greeks would come in. Everybody wanted a piece of Kemet. They all wanted a piece of it. It was the most learned people. These black, they call them the black, they call them the god Heru, Men Heru. He's on the back of my chain. He has an erect phallic. He's jet black. Look it up. Don't believe anything I say. Men Heru was jet black. And he was from the South Sudan and from the South. And he became the symbol of the kingship. Every king that became the king, Ramesses the Great, Thutmose, Ramos, and all these kings that became kings of Kemet, Queen Hatshepsut, they all had a ceremony where they had to go before men and the ruler and the very symbol of the kingship. Men is a very symbol of the kingship. So this is what Europeans have faithfully decided to keep from us and hide it as a secret. But men was jet black. All you gotta do is Google men and you'll see he's black. Even white folks got him as black in the Google and so forth. So this is the beginning of astronomy begins with Cleopatra. Started with Julius Caesar. He was the first one to adapt the Kemetic or Egyptian calendar. And he was assassinated. And then Augustus came along afterwards, continued that project, and he's the one who introduced the Kemetic Egyptian calendar with Sosigenes into the Western world. So through Greece, the Ptolemies, they got the calendar. And so the calendar that we use today was taken all over the Mediterranean by the Romans. And so they had a ceremony called the Navigium Isidis. It means the launching of the ships of Isis. And so everywhere the Romans, every March 5th, the March of 5th, the Romans would go down to the seashore at the Mediterranean, and they'd inaugurate their navigational period. And the one that led the helm of the ship was Isis. And so the Navigium Isidis was the launching of the ships of Isis. And that was a whole Roman navigational period throughout the Mediterranean Sea. And one of the places they ended up in was a place called Londonium, which we call London. Other one, of course, most important one, most notable one is Paris. And so the Navigium Isidis covered that whole area from France all the way to England. And so the Romans built basilicas everywhere they traveled. They set up basilicas everywhere they went. And those basilicas were the architectural design and innovation that began with Imhotep. She had been to a site. Imhotep, 5,000 years ago, That's 3,000 years BCE before the current era. Imhotep designed the world's first basilica at Saqqara. And that basilica set the example for all the basilicas that you see in the world, especially so with St. Peter's Basilica. St. Peter's Basilica, and we have a drawing submitted that I show the old St. Peter's, the present day St. Peter's, and at the bottom I have Karnak, which is our pet I sit called Waret, the temple of Waret. That was the first basilica design in terms of having an influence on the Western world. So the Romans took that. When they shut down all the Kemetic Egyptian temples, drove the priests into isolation, slavery, and all the rest of the things they did to the priests, they took the design of Karnak, Apet-I-Sit Waret, and that became the fountain and the very figure and the foundation for St. Peter's Basilica. Nobody in the world that I know of has put together a presentation like the one you're seeing right now, where I have old St. Peter's, present St. Peter's, and Karnak, one after the other, and I show the atrium, which is the open court. You walk in, she's been in that open court. You walk into the first court at Karnak, it's open. And there's a big statue of a column done by her brother named Taharka, right there in the middle of that court. And off to the right, there's a guy named Ramesses III in that court. And I took a picture of myself, and it's in this book, of me standing in front of that temple done by Ramesses III. When I took that picture in 1985, Dr. Joseph Alfredo Antonio Benyatin declared that this man was a black king. He was a black king, Ramesses III. He over and over again said that. All these years later, the DNA study has come out, and it shows that Ramesses, not only Ramesses, but most of the kings and queens of the 18th dynasty, their DNA can be traced back to Uganda. What they used to call, when I was a kid, deepest, darkest, blackest Africa. Yeah, that's where Ramesses III, King Tutankhamun, all the kings of the 18th dynasty and 19th dynasty, including Ramesses the Great, their DNA can be traced all the way back to the equator and beyond that. But they spent all this time lying to us, writing books, textbooks, misinforming our people about the blackness of the Kemetu. Kemet means black. That's what the black means. It means black. And so the Kemetu means black people. You have figures of a man and a woman behind the figure of Kemet, which is the black land symbol. You have a man and a woman behind it. Those two symbolize in plural Kemetu, the black people. That's what it represents.
That's amazing.
Astrology starts with the Kemetu, the black people, with Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and Sosigenes, the priest, who introduced that calendar to the Western world.
Wow, that's amazing. Go ahead, Tamerri.
I was going to say also, that's astrology as we use it today, right? Like the Roman and Greek gods. But if we think about what astrology is, which is really using the stars as a guide to either foretell something or to get information about yourself, all the temples in Kemet are aligned to positions of the stars. It's all there. So it's really within their civilization. And this was prior to that. So if we really want to go back, there's that, right? Before we started actually reading what the natal chart.
Yeah, if you look at
like Karnak during the winter.
If you look at the winter solstice, yes. Karnak and Queen Hatshepsut's temple are in exact alignment. Now, one is on one side of the Nile, the other is on the other side of the Nile. And so the western side of the Nile is a place of burials. That's where they bury their dead. That side of the Nile is symbolic not of Egypt itself. That side of the Nile is symbolic of what we call the land of Punt. The land of Punt was the ancestral lands to the south. And so there's been a lot of dispute about the actual location, but now I know that the actual beginning of that point is at the equator. And that's what the Egyptians called, or Kemetic called, Great Horizon. The Great Horizon is the equator. That's called the Great Horizon. And so Ater is a symbol of the equator when the sun is at the equator during the spring, summer, for the summer. Now, Tamerri is my sign. I'm a Libra. It's when the scales are equal and balanced again. When the sun is back to the equator and then it's balanced again, that's where we have Tamerri. That's the period of judgment. That's the period of darkness. All the things that take place during that particular time are the opposite of what takes place during the spring equinox. And so I've got symbols of all this stuff. The Dendera ceiling, they have a picture of Het Haru, and they have her sitting at the balances where the goddess Nut is draped over, and they got two mountains. This is at the temple of Dendera.
It's on my wall. He brought it. He gave me that from Kemetic.
Yeah. And so right there, you have two mountains. That was a very ancient way. You understand that we're talking about people doing stuff thousands of years ago. That was the way they were able to illustrate. I was an illustrator, delineator for Boeing, for McDonnell Douglas. I did it as a profession. Outside of what I was doing in terms of architecture, that was another whole field. And so this whole idea of how they illustrated was a very primitive form, but it's very accurate. So that's what I've been able to do in my books, if I ever get these books out. It showed that what they had illustrated was truly accurate, and that right there at the Great Rift Valley, around what we call Lake Victoria in Nyanza, where that lake is, there are two big mountain ranges on both sides of the lake. And that's what they were trying to illustrate at the temple of Het Haru. Het Haru, she comes from God's land. They tell you that in all the texts. Haru, he begins at the equator. That's where the balance of day and night takes place at the equator. So all the things that they have illustrated and delineated architecturally, philosophically, and scientifically, all align. Like those buildings, Queen Hatshepsut's building and Karnak are exact alignment at the winter solstice. They're in exact alignment with each other. They didn't celebrate Christmas, but that was the winter solstice they were celebrating. That was before Christmas. I don't want to take a money.
Listen, when wisdom is being dropped, when wisdom is being shared, you learn to just sit and soak it up. And I just appreciate you taking us through that whole journey, Mathu, and really helping us to understand, like, even just the name Tamerri and what that symbolizes for the study of history, and particularly the study of astrology, how it's tied together. The whole point about the architecture of taking us on a journey from the Mediterranean all the way down the Nile to the equator, and helping us to understand that at that equatorial point, that's where we have the North Star, and that's where we're able to start the journey of mapping out the sky, and that connection with astronomy and astrology, and how that whole history is encapsulated in the journey of the Kemetic people, is encapsulated in how we understand astrology today. Like, that was a beautiful way for people to be able to get a full picture of what that means. I love having the 50,000 foot level, and then we can dive a little bit deeper into more of the details as we go along. But just understanding, like, your journey and clearly your passion for this, Mr. Ater, and how important it is for us as people who unfortunately don't have as thorough of a connection with our history as African Americans in this country, being able to have people who have that that command of the subject and that experience, and who've actually been to the continent and been to these places and have firsthand accounts. It's gold, quite frankly. And so I'm thrilled to be able to hear you speak about that. And I love that you gave
In
us so
fact,
much to.
let me say how I got my name.
Yes.
I got my name. In 1983, Dr. Ben is a Beta Israel. He's an Ethiopian Jew. He was born in Ethiopia as a Jew, as an Ethiopian Jew. And his people lived up around the area in around Lake Tana. That's way up in the mountains of Ethiopia. That's where his people were from, the Beta Israel. And in 1983, he went back there with her godfather, Astrofashionista. And he came back to L.A., and I didn't know it at the time, but we were at a Kwanzaa gathering at his house in December. Now, he wasn't doing it probably August or something like that. But December, when he walks up to me, we're at Kwanzaa, everybody's sitting around having a good time, and he walks over and says, Mathu. I said, what's that? He said, that's your name, brother. He said, this priest sent that name to you from the highlands of Ethiopia around Lake Tana. And I had another brother with me. I was showing him around L.A. during Kwanzaa. And one of my cousins, Dorrissa Griffin, she was on crack. My sister was on crack. She remembered, I hadn't seen her probably about 2 years. She remembered I used to always talk about Africa when I was in high school. I get a call from her out of nowhere. She says, there's a brother from Africa. She said, Africa, I'd like for you to meet. And she gave me his phone number. That's what this is weird. I hadn't heard from her in like a couple of years. So I called him, and the brother's name was Mathu Ater. And the brother had been in the United States. He worked for Chevron Oil, and he was from the South Sudan. And I was showing him around during Kwanzaa. So when I got to Kwesi's house, asked for Kwesi's house, for Godfather's house, when he said Mathu Ater, he had so much joy from me showing him around Kwanzaa. He said, I would like for you to have my name, Ater. Ater means high in stature. Mathu means worthy of the throne. So high in stature and worthy of the throne were the two names I received on the day I wasn't even looking for a name. They both came to me on the same day. And that's how she got her name.
That's beautiful.
That's where it came.
South Sudan, your Abu symbol.
South Sudan is even further than that.
Yeah.
It's all the way to where the Nile flows out of Uganda and empties into an area called the Suez. It's a large area of reeds, papyruses, and lotus flowers. So it's a huge swamp. The whole area is created by the Nile overflowing from Uganda, and it splashes down in the area called the Suez. I had an illustration, but we'll be able to show you that illustration, where the temple of Karnak was really built as a model of the trip from the Lower Egypt to Upper Egypt. And what they did is they stepped the floor of the temple and they stepped the ceiling of the temple down. So when you get to the end of the temple architecturally, you'll reach the place where heaven and earth comes together. The lowest point of the ceiling and the highest point of the floor are together in the place called the Curry Chamber, which is the Holy of Holies. The most sacred place in the temple, the Holy of Holies, is a place where the ceiling of the temple and the floor are closest together. And when you get to that point, you'll reach what we call the land of Punt, what we call Uganda, Tanzania, Central, deepest, darkest, blackest Africa. That's what that temple Karnak represented. The truth. And that's what Queen Hatshepsut called it. She called it the temple of creation, what that temple was representative of. And there was a more appropriate fact. The temple of Notre Dame, it comes right out of that whole scenario of the temples of Karnak and the Pope's temples. I wanted to read this because This kind of speaks value. It's a book I had been writing called Our Lady, the House of Isis. I just now getting back to it. This is a quote I had. Her own name is considered by many scholars to mean throne, while to others, when combined with Ma'at, it signifies ancient wisdom. Every living being is a drop of her blood, to be protected under her wings in death and lovingly restored to life. Though the greatest danger to the church, she has never entirely lost her popularity and prestige in the West. Diana is the queen of the night for witches, Isis for Masons and Rosicrucians. Of the great black virgin cities of France, Lyon is devoted to Sybil. The patroness of Marseilles is Artemis. Talos is the palace of Athene. In its very essence is the queen of the South, home of the Gnostic wisdom school in the 6th century. It was left to Paris, par excellence, from Paris, eventually the greatest of them all, to be selected by Isis, the greatest of the goddesses, as her sacred capital. Quote from Ian Begg, who wrote a book called The Cult of the Black Virgin.
That's
So that's
amazing.
where your astrology starts. And Notre Dame has a window right here, astrological window, with Jesus and Mary standing right in front of it, symbolizing Isis and Horus from going all the way back to antiquity.
Yes, I think that's a beautiful transition because I wanted to talk about the connection, more deeply talk about the connection with Africa and with astrology, and even the conversation around how that ties into many of the things that we know as religion today. So much of that is based on these symbols, these themes, these deities from ancient African culture. You mentioned Heru and you mentioned Isis, or I think it's Aset. That's another name. Yes, Aset. So I think helping people to understand how some of these things have evolved to present day, but really understanding their origin more deeply. So you took us to Paris, you took us to Notre Dame, the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and you pointed out on the steeple or the temple itself of Notre Dame, or the Church of Notre Dame, there is a symbol of Haru, or Isis as some people call, and Aset. Also Aset and Heru, the son, the little baby. So can you go more into that and helping people understand kind of like that connection and that foundation?
More so than any other people, the sun is the most prevailing element that we know of, because in Africa, the sun is everything. And so the king of Kemet was called the son of the sun. That was his name, the son of the sun. And Haru, of course, Haru was the sun. And so when you look at Menkamutev, the black symbol of the King Men, Menkamutev was Haru, was a form of Haru. He was a form of Haru, this god, as we call it in contemporary terms, this god. And so Hathor, Haru, was the house of Horus. And so you see the symbol of Haru, and the house where the sun is born, they saw it as the equator, where the great horizon was, where the sun balanced out day and night, equal day and equal night. That was the great balance at the equator. And so Haru was everything in terms of that. That's why Akhenaten took the name Akhet as his name, Akhet. Again, that's the sun. And so he kind of simplified it a bit. He got a lot of people pissed off about it. But nevertheless, stance on morality and that kind of thing was very instrumental in developing contemporary thinking about religion. I've lectured on these subjects many, many times over many, many years. And so we'll have to come back and do something later.
What is it? One lecture is Africa, the mother of the Christian church.
The Egyptian temple.
Egyptian temple.
The Egyptian temple, mother of the Christian church.
You can find that on YouTube.
That's on, yeah, them available.
I'm sure.
It's an old lecture, but it's still good.
Right.
Things have advanced. People have advanced. People have learned more over the years. And so as time goes on, it's important to replenish those things and do that kind of thing. So I just, all those lectures, somebody else put them on. I didn't put any of those lectures on YouTube. That's a compliment to me from other people that enjoyed the works I was doing. So all those lectures, Imhotep, a lecture on Imhotep, on Egyptian temple. I lectured on Mexico. I traveled all over Mexico, the pyramids and temples of Mexico, and identified the similarities and the proximities of things in Mexico in association with the Nile Valley. It took me years. It took me about 7 trips to Mexico to do that. I had a tour in 2003. A group go to Mexico to see the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. The alignment of the Moon Pyramid perpendicular to the Sun Pyramid. So they had all these alignments and so forth. So there's a lot of similarities in ancient architecture. So those are the kind of things I was focused on. And so I'm 68 now. I'll be 69 this year. So I'm trying to make the most out of what I got to work with now. So these people here, like this one here, she's gonna have to take some of this stuff, go on, move on with it. So that's not leaving. I'm leaving for them. My son Taharka, my son Taharka, same way. He's very knowledgeable. I once had he had a teacher in middle school that came to see one of my lectures at a place called The Good Life on Crenshaw. She came in there to see that lecture, and her mom was blown. She said, "Let me know whenever you do that lecture." So my son ended up having her as a teacher. And we were always talking. We went out a couple of times. And then she called me one day and said, "Why your son, Tarkin, had to be in my class? Every time I say something, he corrects me." So my son was with me when Dr. Ben ended up flying me to lecture with him in Washington, D.C. My son Taharka was with me when Dr. Ben saw my lecture on Imhotep. Dr. Ben was so impressed with that lecture. 2 months later, I was lecturing with him in D.C. So these are things that I had no control over that. I had no control over the names. These are things that just happen. And so if the ancestors want you to have something, you'll get it.
That's beautiful. Yes, I believe that. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to learn and to share this information with so many people. I believe that when the ancestors are ready for you to have a lesson, that's when it's going to show up. That's what you'll get to learn. And so I'm just excited about this. I really wanted to focus on helping people understand just how Black astrology actually is. It's one of those things that I think so much of what happens in society today gets divorced from its origins for so many reasons, colonialism being one of them, white supremacy being one of them. But I think it's important whenever you have the opportunity, especially on occasions like subject of Juneteenth. We know that Black history is 24/7, 365. But when it's highlighted, when it's in the spotlight like this, it's important to make sure that we use that opportunity to point things back to the source, to the origin, and apply proper recognition and give credit where credit is due. And so I just want people to really understand the origins of it.
There's something I think that should be mentioned as important. That when they built the Greeks or the Ptolemies, they rebuilt a lot of the temples that were in ruins in Kemet. We had massive invasions of people time after the Persians came in. All kinds of people invaded Kemet. And so when they built Dendera and Epsom, some of the items from Mesopotamia, some of the astrology from there was integrated with the Kemetic. And so that's where Dendera has a combination of elements. Now, this is very important, though, because there were Black people also in Mesopotamia. This was long before the Babylonians. We had Black people there And when my brain gets to moving so fast, man, Sumerians,
Take your time.
from Sumer, Sumerians and people like that, they were black people. And so over the years, what eventually came to be the astronomy of Mesopotamia, with time was integrated with the astronomy in Kemetic. And so a lot of the stuff that we have today is the sum total of the two that was put together at Dendera and at Edfu in particular, those two sites in particular. So I want to make sure I mention that because there are astrologers out here who know that Dendera and the Temple of Hathor, all those temples that we have throughout Kemet that were rebuilt. They were rebuilt by Black Egyptian priests, and they were built under the governance of the Ptolemies, who were a Greek population. And they were there for about 300 years in Kemet. And so Cleopatra was the very last one, and she is the one that introduced, with Sosigenes, the Kemetic calendar into the Western world. That's how it got introduced there. So I just want to make that distinction.
I think it's also important to mention culture in general. And like when you look at different African civilizations, it's culture. There's not a separation from the way you eat, the music you listen to, your spirituality. It's all a part of the culture. And when you think about colonialism and the introduction of Christianity, and I'm not here to rag on Christianity at all, because I know that Black people, there's so many of us, our family included.
Yeah, about 90%.
Yeah, most of our family are Christian. That was really deconstruction of the culture and a separation from the culture. So when we think about the spirituality that we were practicing in our native land, that included deities, which is a direct connection to the gods of ancient Egypt, whether you're in Ghana or West Africa, you're in East Africa. There's so many similarities between the cultures that can't be ignored because it's the same continent. They're very different, but they all have a similar origin. And so I think a lot of it is just the colonialism, the spread of Christianity as we know it.
I like to use rap music as an example because rap is started by Black folks. Curtis Blue and all those cats like that, they started rap. So now you got Eminem, you got all these different people who are rappers. But the synthesis of what we call rap today comes from a basic configuration that was created by Black people. And that goes always all the way back to soul music, to New Orleans, to jazz. Those are all art forms that Black people use to express themselves to help them overcome the difficult conditions that they experienced during slavery. So the creativity of Black people was what emanated from the struggle that we had to deal with. So rap is no different. It came out of that same need to survive from a difficult situation. But rap is universal. You got white folks in England singing rap. You got white people in Davenport, Iowa, all over the place doing stuff. But the foundation of it, just like with Kemet, Black people, that's where it starts. There's just no way to argue with that. And my people, Christianity exists because Kemet existed.
Right.
The churches of Christianity are showing that with the Vatican and the Karnak Temple. That starts with Kemet. So going to church, you wasn't going to church until Karnak got started. I don't know if you're maybe not old enough to remember, but Johnny Carson. I used to watch today I watched Jimmy Kimmel. When I was coming up, I watched Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson used to have this turban. He had this little skit. He'd have a turban on, and he'd have a letter, and he'd put the letter next to his turban, and then he'll psychically decipher what's in the letter, that kind of thing. But his name, when he did that, was called the Great Karnak. That was what go look it up. Look up Johnny Carson and the Great Karnak, and you'll see him with that little envelope sticking to a turban. Karnak, it showed you the power of Karnak, that it was still prevalent even when Johnny Carson came up with his. He was the original talk show host. Merv Griffin, those guys were the original talk show hosts. But he had Karnak with a turban and a letter showing the power and majesty of Karnak in his expression of being a wise man on TV when he's cracking jokes. So,
Yeah.
And last point about that, astrology is so interwoven within Christianity. And I think, well, there was a time where astrology no longer served that. Like priests were astrologers. There was no separation when we're talking about the history of astrology. And we're not just talking about in Kemet or Egypt, we're talking about just in general in Europe. And so with the spread of Christianity, if you go walk through the Vatican, if you go to any church, I was just in Colombia, you will see the astrological symbols all throughout churches. They're there wide open. And it's so funny that those are some of the people that fight it the most just don't understand that it's integrated within the history of it all. And it's right in front of their face when they go to church, especially Catholic church. So there is, I hate that there's a separation. Like you don't have to, you can be Christian and use astrology as a tool. You can be Muslim. You can have any type of religion. It's not a religion. It's a tool that is used for me personally to help navigate my life and understand myself better. And so I just wanted to make that point because there's always that contention that people that don't understand it, it's like, well, it's interwoven in your religion. You just haven't taken time to really study the history. That's why history is so important.
Some people run you out of the church and call you the devil.
Right. I'm like, there's the 4 fixed signs right there for Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo right in front of your face on your stained glass. Yeah. So yeah. But
Wow, that's really powerful. Yeah, I think that having that understanding of how so many things are intertwined and we may not be aware of them, but we're still in some ways impacted by them. And so taking the time to really understand that and having people such as yourselves to really help us get those connections and understand those things is really amazing. And we've talked a lot about how astrology is connected to things in the present day. I would love to take a step back and see how astrology was used in those times in ancient Africa. Like, was it more so what we have like today, where it's more of this introspective kind of focus and it is driven by a need to necessarily understand oneself? Or did it have more of an agricultural focus or just a focus on just really understanding the heavens in general?
a lot with mundane astrology, which is like the study of everyday, just understanding life around you. I'm speaking generally. Albert can go.
Yeah, well,
further.
building, astrology, all those are related.
The rising of
Agriculture is all
the
related.
rising of Sirius when the flooding of the Nile happened.
Yeah.
So it was a lot to understand. It was the topographical, geographical, astrological,
And that's,
topographical, geographical, astrological, astronomical. No, what am I missing?
geographical.
Geographical.
Let me get
He always
on
says
let me get on this here. Geographical, geological,
Geological,
topographical, and astronomical.
astronomical.
Topography is the terrain. And so the geology is actual spread it and lay of the land. And so the astronomical is the most important part in terms of where we're sitting in this universe. And so in Kemet, they knew about Mars and they knew about planets and they had all that mapped out in tombs.
Yeah, and the
There were no
journey of
Europeans with no knowledge like that when that happened. None.
the journey of Ra. So that's like such an important. The reason they believe the sun rose and set was because he was going on this journey to fight Apophis or Apet,
That was
to fight the
the
serpent.
serpent.
And because he was victorious, we had sunlight every day. So that alone is
And the place that took place, that's right at the horizon. That's where it took place. The battle between Horus and Set.
Wow.
These are things I've covered for years, man. I got books I've written, but I just haven't been able to get them out. Hopefully now I'll be able to get them out. I got my first one coming out. So
I think the main difference is it was just a part of survival. Now we use it as separate tool, like more psychological. But when you're living in a time where there's no electricity and you can see the stars and like it's just a part of life. It just is. And so that's why it's called mundane astrology. Astrologers call it that, but it's just ingrained in your life.
when you go to Kemet at night, you see stars everywhere. You see stars you never knew existed. And you can see it's like a blanket of stars. It's like something you've never seen before. Because you're under the spotlights of LA, traffic lights and lights, they blur everything. You don't even know the stars up there. When you go to a place like that, where she's been there, you can see the stars, man. And you say, wow, this is why stars were so important. Because you can see them, and they're like big lamps in the heaven.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I love that Tamerri has really been able to take a lot of what it is that she's done with her experiences growing up, as well as her experiences with traveling to Egypt and with being able to do a lot of the things that she's done and put that into her branding, put that into her whole company. Like, I just think that's really powerful. And I would love to talk more about that and talk about why it was such an important part for you to make sure that that was represented in your business and how it is that you, through your products, help people to bring a little bit of that into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, I always just follow the sign. I'm very driven, but at some point I just let things happen. And I think that's when the magic of life really happens. I'm actually listening to this book about surrender. And so for me, I always thought, oh, I might have a product line because I worked in beauty. I was making products for everybody else, but I didn't want to just like slap a zodiac sign. I had that opportunity for partnerships. Hey, let's make a zodiac collection. And that always felt really inauthentic to me. There was no connection. So I got a download about the healing aspect. Cause, with Astrofashionista, I'm always talking mainly to women in these intimate one-on-one sessions. And people are like, after the session, I give this information, and some of them are still wanting stuff. They either want, I need a therapist I need to recommend them to, or some sort of tool. And so the way that I live my life, and I'm really about ritual. I mean, I grew up, I didn't realize how important it was that we celebrated Kwanzaa. We prayed to our ancestors. We had libation. Like all of these things were ingrained in my bringing. So I still feel connected to it. I'm always burning incense. I'm always like, scent. All of that is super important. It was important in Kemet. Like that was a big part. Like he's more the history part.
The diameter of your knowledge is equivalent to the circumference of your activity.
Yeah.
Your knowledge consists of one book. Your diameter is a small diameter.
Yeah.
So if you got the Bible, the Holy Quran, you got the Torah, you got the Book of Coming Forth by Day, the Book of the Dead, you got all these books. You see, you got a much larger circumference of activities. So you can't just sit around talking about I goes by the Bible, I goes by the Bible. You got a very small circumference of activity when you do that. So
Yeah.
Powerful message.
Right. Oh, what I was saying, that's a great point. Because basically, I was exposed to a lot of different things. And so for me, I got the connection to provide a tool for healing through product because that's what I know how to do. I'm really good at scent and sensory, the Taurus. I love beauty and aesthetics. I'm a perfectionist. And the Egypt, it just came. I was like, it just came to me one day. I said, I'm going to connect that because that's my other love. That's the thing that I grew up in. I was around it my whole life, my name. And then when I asked my brother, I gave him the idea. He said, Gift of the Nile. I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. Like, I was trying to come up with some name. He's like, it's Gift of the Nile. And I said, that's it. So it just kind of all organically.
that's who you are.
Yeah, Sagittarius.
That's who you are.
Sagittarius brother. Yeah.
You were
So
born with that.
it just came together. And as I was working on it, and I was like, I could tell, because I've always been into the history part is important. My brother is a history buff too, Sag. For me, I was always interested in the mythology. I loved that part. I loved the story of Isis, Aset, and Osiris, and Heru, and Asar. I was always drawn to that. So for me, that integration with the products was like what I was drawn to. So yeah, the story just came together and I started working on it. And I said, I'm just going to put this out. And at the time I was applying to business school at UCLA. And I wrote about that in my personal statement that I wanted to build this global wellness brand. And that's kind of how it was born. So it was very organic and very authentic to me. It's something that I feel like is my point of difference, can be replicated. A lot of people have aromatherapy. That's not a new concept. I didn't invent it, but this is my take on it. And it also incorporates both of my parent, my dad's influence on me, and my mom is the healing aspect. I would say if I could have helped her, I would have, and I think that's why I know that's why I do the work that I do and why I experience that because I'm supposed to be my executive coach came up with 3 words for my purpose: leader, healer, teacher, which I knew my purpose, but she summed it up in those 3 words. And so to me, it was easy for me to do something that's authentically myself. And it's the thing I'm most passionate about. And it doesn't feel like work. It's fun to me.
Her mom would be so incredibly proud of her right now.
Capricorn.
Yeah, she's a Capricorn. Because the things she's been able to achieve, man, and the circumstances under which she's been able to achieve them have been remarkable. So, yeah, I have no doubt about it. Tamerri Ater is very pleased
Yes,
with
yes.
the work we're doing.
That's
Things-
beautiful.
All the
Yeah.
time.
No question about it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that journey, and I got to witness a part of that. And the whole conversation, as Mathu was speaking, Mr. Ater was speaking, I was like envisioning the Instagram post that Tamerri did, where she was going to the different temples. You were traveling on the Nile on the boats. You had a particular instance where you went into this perfumery, this shop where there were all these oils and authentic Egyptian oils, and you were having this experiences there. And I was just following you along this journey on Instagram. And as I mentioned, I don't think I usually do a better job of this, but when I usually start a podcast, I talk about how I know a person. And I think we talked about it before we started recording. So just to give people a little bit of a background, I had the beautiful pleasure of meeting Tamerri in 2020 during a business mastermind course that I was taking. And in it, we had like this networking session with other cohort members, and a friend of hers, Sant, I forget the Sant's last name, but he was in one of the cohorts with me. And he, at the networking event, when we were talking about our different businesses, our business being Cos Music, which is an app that will create a personal theme song based on your astrology, he said, "Oh, you're going to do astrology. I have to tell you about my friend Tamerri. She's an astrologer. She's been doing astrology since I can remember, ever since I met her. She does all this other great stuff in beauty. And if you're interested, I would love to introduce you and connect you to." And so that's how I got the pleasure of meeting you through this business mastermind that Paul Brunson was putting on. He's like this famous matchmaker that a lot of people know, but he also does a lot of business. He has articles in the business journals. I forget the name of them now, but he does a lot of stuff in business journalism and with Black enterprise as well. And so he was putting on this cohort, and Toussaint helped me get connected to you. And so it's just been so wonderful being able to watch your journey. And you've just been so open with giving me different tips and advice. And of course, seeing what you're doing astrologically and helping people along their journey has just been so powerful. So when I saw you in Egypt and I saw you in this perfumery, I was like, you have to pay attention, because she's probably getting ready to do something, and whatever it is, you want it. And I was just blown away. So let's just fangirl out just a little bit. This is her product. It's not, I don't have the best camera, but this is one of many. And when I tell you that the gift of the Nile is unlike any other aroma experience that I've ever had, it is luxury personified. Hello, Taurus. It is definitely something that has a spiritual aspect to it, because when you spray the scents, the olfactory is such a powerful sense that it's very primordial. And I don't think people really understand how much of that. There are 2 parts of us that we can't really close: our ears and our nose. So it's really impactful for us to be able to have something that's aromatherapy that we can spray, we can smell. And all of them have Kemetic names. All of them have a connection to Kemetic deities. And it's just really powerful to be able to add this to my personal ritual journey, every day in my meditations. Like, it is amazing. So I'm going to let you talk about it. But I really just had to give you your due and to know that I'm now being in the presence of the man who made so much of this possible by infusing his journey with this beautiful history that we have as African people, to be able to share that experience and just to give you your flowers.
Thank you.
It's really amazing.
It means a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you said it best. It's really products. One of the things in my deck, my presentation deck, is the world has enough beauty products. What people need is healing. And I'm a beauty girl. Don't get me wrong. It's one of my loves. But I really think if people took time we're in such a busy time, so it's important to have those rituals for yourself. It's important to meditate. It's important to breathe. People forget to breathe. It's important to take a walk. And these are simple things that are free for us, right? And so my products really are designed to help you on those journeys. I call it micro moments of peace throughout your day. And that's really what it is. So you were holding up the aromatherapy mood and body mist, the Ma'at, that's for overall balance. Ma'at, one of the most important goddesses, deities of Kemet. And so I have Hathor. I have a Hathor love collection, which is not only about romantic love, it's self-love, because right after I launched the collection, I decided to get a divorce. So everything that I use, it's authentic. I'm not just putting things out there for people to buy. I live and breathe by it myself, and it helps me. So everything that I do, I want people to feel the way you described how you feel. So that means I'm doing something right. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Well, beloved, I've been so impressed with this program. It's certainly been a pleasure and an honor to be in your presence with Tamerri Ater. It's good to see the young people continue to carry on this tradition that we've had from others, going back to my father and my mother, and all the things that I had to deal with when I was a little kid. And she never met her grandmother, but she met her grandfather, and she loved her grandfather, and her grandfather loved her. So
Virgo.
Yeah, so we do what we can do, man, whenever we can do it. So it's been my pleasure with you, being with you.
Mr. Ater, I really appreciate your time. I can wrap things up with Tamerri. I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I have appreciated everything. I'm going to go back through this and soak up some things that you said. And I may have some follow-up questions on like how to make sure I'm citing things correctly and spelling them correctly. But I greatly appreciate you joining us on the Confidence by the Stars podcast. And I look forward to staying in contact at least.
Definitely. You got some photographs, so she can help me integrate those into the format of how you put that together.
Okay.
So it's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm going to get up before I won't be able to stand up. I love your daughter.
I love you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's my gift.
Yes.
So when she first came out, when she was born, the day she was born, she got the nickname Scooter because she was already scooting. We went to see her for the first time. She was scooting, already had her head up in the air, and she'd already had a bowel movement. I knew she was going to be special.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mr. Ater.
Yes.
But yeah, I have maybe a couple more questions, Tamerri. Where do you think we would be without the contributions of Blacks in astrology and astronomy? How different would you see the world? How different do you think the world would be without those contributions?
Very different. I mean, it's hard to say, but maybe we wouldn't have those things. I mean, that's the only thing maybe we would. It might have been just a different set of people that the world does not belong to any particular group. So that sounds very, egocentric. But I think it's more important to acknowledge that people should recognize our contribution, because that's one of the things, like my dad mentioned, that the history and them trying to erase it. And this is it's nothing new. If you go to Kemet, they've knocked noses and lips off of statues to not show the clearly African features. This has been intentionally done to keep the agenda that Black people are inferior going, right? So I think it's more important to talk about, and that's why we're not saying these things just to say them. The reason why my dad keeps emphasizing these were Black people is because they try to deny it. And that in turn has affected our entire race of children who don't understand that they come from a line of greatness, that they are smart, that they were teachers. We come from a line of teachers. Kemet was like the Harvard of the time where people came to study there. And Africa in general was a beautiful and luscious, and still is, resourceful place because people are still trying to take our resources from there. So it's just whatever narrative that's being made, it's important for us to reverse it. And now I realize how important it was. I was raised very pro-Black. Like that was ingrained in me from a young girl. Like, you are Black. This is beautiful. People want to be Black. Like, and it was a reverse brainwashing that I realized that my dad was doing because he knew I would go into the world and I would be told otherwise. And so it all makes sense. So I think it's more important to talk about why we are always saying I'm Black. We have to shout it because no one else believes it or they don't want us to know it. And we're already, as a race, behind. And it wasn't always that way. So that's why our history is so important, because we're just trying to get back to a level playing field in this modern day. And it's to know where we came from is important.
Absolutely. It's absolutely essential that we take the time to understand, and we have examples and we have information and access to information that can help us elevate our knowledge. So I loved having this conversation with you and your dad. It's just been such a joy. And
Wow.
I really hope that the viewers and the listeners understand like how powerful this information is, how amazing it is to be able to talk with someone who's knowledgeable, who's experienced, and even someone who embodies the very essence of a lot of this rich ancient African history that we have. And to be able to engage and to share this is like truly a gift.
Wow.
And I love the fact that on the topic of gifts, one of the stories that I really resonate with in my understanding and exploration of Egyptology and the Kemetic history is the story of the Magi and how they came and they gave these gifts to Haru, and they were all different little blessings. And I feel like we all have our own journey, and we all need things along that journey to help us, to bless us, to help us be able to grow. And so that's what I like to call the 3 whys. And I would love to know if there are gifts that you've received along your journey. They can be sayings that you have come across that have helped you. They can be people, what I call sages, that have been helpful to you, or they can be sounds, things like movies, or even something that is very, very mundane that have been gifts to you. So just 3 of those. They can be one of each or however you want to go about it.
Yeah, it's been so many blessings that I've received. I would say people has been a big one, whether it's like the Astro twins, me having to work in their manager's office, like that was definitely a divine thing. Or people that like bosses that I've worked with that really supported me in my career. I don't know if there's like this one defining, but I have that a lot in my life. There's a lot of synchronicity around me. And I think everybody has that ability, but it happens so often for me that I don't believe in any coincidences. So I think the people that I meet are a big one. There's the one thing that I'm really trying to lean into is presence. And I fight with that every single day. There's this journal that I've gotten years ago. Actually, there's a book and it says, "Life is a journey, not a destination." I used to plan my business stuff in this journal maybe almost 10 years ago. And I'm always constantly trying to remind myself of that as a achiever and someone that's always chasing the next thing. I'm tired. And I don't want to live in that. I've always wanted, like, inner peace has always been really my goal. So I'm constantly trying to accept whatever I'm going through at the moment as, like, it'll really surrender and trust that it's happening and live in that time. So that would be the second thing. The third thing, I guess, would be my family, I would say. And I think family dynamics are always complicated for everyone. No one comes I don't know people that have a perfect family. If they claim, please write in and let us know. And so our family is no different. I feel like there's been so many gifts through it, but I've had so many tragedies surrounding family outside of my mom, just so much there. But I think that lineage, like, I think to be born with my dad as my father was like a big gift for me. Yeah. I feel a lot of burden and responsibility around him. Like, sometimes I have a North Node in Gemini and South Node in Sag, and he has South Node in Gemini, North Node in Sag. So we have, like, this past life thing. I think maybe it was his mom. I don't know. It gets like a little new agey, but there's just there's a thing there that I'm very grateful for, because obviously what he's poured into me is so much of who I am and that I still carry. I'm not trying to run from that part of myself. I think, and I think I'm like the exact blend of both of my parents and their skill sets and who they are. Like, I am that. I could see that in both of them. So that would probably be the third thing.
Beautiful. I love that. Tamerri, it has been such a pleasure to be able to talk with you and to hear your journey, to absorb the wisdom and knowledge and information from your dad, and to just have the opportunity to learn from you and to share. And so thank you so much for being a part of the Confidence by the Stars podcast. I would love for you to share with the listeners and the viewers how they can stay connected with you and any special things that you would like for them to know to be able to continue.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. If you want to reach me for an astrology reading, you can reach me at astrofashionista.com. That's exactly how it's spelled, astro and then fashionista. That's where you can book an astrology reading. If you want to try Gift of the Nile for yourself, you can go to thegiftofthenile.com and shop the product. And I don't know if I have anything immediate on the horizon in terms of, just look out for more products and sign up for my mailing list.
You also
And
have a
follow me.
podcast.
Oh, yes, the Astrology Chronicles. And that is on all Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And yeah, just follow me on Instagram or social media at Astrofashionista and Gift of the Nile. Just keep in touch. That's probably the easiest way to hear what I have got going on.
Fantastic. Well, yes, we definitely want you guys to connect with Tamerri. Is there any place that we would be able to connect with your dad? Or, I mean, he's mentioned a couple of times he has some books in the works.
Yes.
So I would love to know more about those things for him.
He's on Facebook, okay? Like all the elders. No, I'm not joking, but I'm not joking. So if you really want to reach him, find him on Facebook. He'll be on there. There needs to be, I have his domain name. We need a whole relaunch of his brand. That's a whole thing in itself. But his books, he's actually been working on for a very long time, and I've seen it. They have them. He has about 3 of them. So I don't know which one. I think one is going to be released first is on Imhotep. So if you follow me, you'll probably hear about it, because obviously that'll be a big thing for me as well to be able to promote that. But yeah, if you really want to reach him, go to Facebook and send him a message. And look out, go put him on YouTube. A lot of people have put his stuff from years ago on YouTube. You can watch a lot of his older lectures and get some of the knowledge in more time. There's more time on those. So I know he talked a lot here, but yeah, those lectures are more thorough.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, we will absolutely do that. And again, thank you so much for coming to Confidence by the Stars. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Awesome.